Going live. It is live. We are in there. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the throne room. We are having for the month of July, we are going to be celebrating minority mental health. And so we are having our healing challenge, the mental health edition. And with me today, as always, are my friends, my family, my brothers and my sisters. I have with me Brother Ned White. He's below me. He is from Pure Care Ministries. We have my other brother right underneath me on the other side. My other brother, Jerome King, with all of the special digits behind his name that make him qualified to join this conversation.
I left him out today.
Right, along with the experiences. It's all right because people need to know. And then I have, as always, my sister, my friend, everything. She's everything to me. I have Sister Jackie.
Yes.
For Your Mind, Inc. They are all here with me today. How are all y'all doing today?
Doing well.
Everybody doing good.
I'm gonna say the church thing. I'm blessed and highly favored.
Exactly.
Oh, she's gonna bring a church on y'all today, okay? Oh, he got the praise that's going on. All right.
The praise clap going on that one.
Well, I'm really excited because we get an opportunity to come together and have this listening session. Everybody who joined us last week, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for taking the time to participate with us. Remember, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop your questions in the comments section below. If you have anything in particular that you want to talk about, or statement that you want to make, feel free to give it. We want to hear from you. This isn't just about us. I also want to put this statement out here. We do not claim to know everything. We don't claim to be complete experts. We all have our own expertise in certain areas, but we are having conversation that needs to be had for the benefit and the health and well-being of our communities, which we love. And so we want to thank you for joining us in this conversation. As we begin, did everybody get a chance to like, share, do what all they need to do before we get started? Because, I don't want that to be an interruption. So go ahead and like and share, do what you do, how you do it.
We doing it.
All right. So we sharing it.
Doing it well.
That's it. So
this could be that
we
kind
like
of
to
day.
have fun.
I don't know nothing about that.
She's in a musical mood today.
That's all right. We're gonna have
got the rhythm in
her.
Yes.
We're going to have fun today. We need to have fun with the conversation, right? As we talk about minority mental health, one of the things that I know to be true is that there's a lot of stigma and shame that is in this conversation. And we need to be able to have spaces whereby we can take the cover off, where we can be open and transparent, where we are able to be vulnerable, and where we're not judged. And that's the space that we've created here for you, me, and everyone else who wants to be a part of the conversation. So I'm going to just jump right into it right now. Brother Jerome,
yes,
ready to take the cover off?
I'm ready to take it off.
All right. Well, Brother Jerome, if anybody had seen the what do you call it? The
promo
video.
I didn't think about the name, but if anyone saw the promo video, if you got an opportunity to see it, Brother Jerome did a wonderful job in giving his own testimony, right? Shedding light on what he had seen in his journey. And I think it's important for us to highlight that, because oftentimes people think that they have to not share, they have to hide, somehow they have to cover up who they are and what they've been through, that people won't understand that they are exempt, or that they're different than others. But I just want to say thank you, Brother Jerome, for having the courage to share with us your testimony. One of the things that I'm going to highlight in this conversation is the fact that you opened up your statement with your perspective of how you wanted to deal with trauma and minority mental health. And you said you got to do it from an event perspective. And then you went on to talk about your experience of being arrested by the police. I want to talk about why is it so important for us to understand things from the event standpoint. What is it about that particular experience that you want the listeners to understand about the event?
Thank you so much. And yes, that I simply followed the instructions. You told me to get off and go do that video right away so that it was fresh and spontaneous. So I didn't write anything down this time. I just
I'm
did it
so
from the
glad.
heart. I think there's, as we were talking just a little bit before the show, there's kind of two ways to kind of look at mental wellness. You can look at it proactively, which our community hasn't quite gotten to yet, or you can look at it reactively. And that's we're beginning to talk about that because there's so many traumatic events and killings and arrests and all the things that are taking place in our community now that's been exacerbated by this whole pandemic. So I've had several events, but the one that I chose to talk about in the promo was the time when I actually had called the police on myself. I was in desperation. I basically dialed 911 and announced that I was about to kill myself. Now that was about the fourth time, so I know what that desperation felt like. So on that fourth time, I called because I needed help, and I needed help fast because I was not comfortable with myself at that moment, and I no longer wanted to exist. So anyway, the police arrived and they thought that I was having some type of drug-induced event because I was, hysterical. I was crying. They asked if I was the one that had called, and of course I was. I was there alone. I was the only one there, so they realized that there were no other victims involved. But their response was to handcuff me, which they told me it was for their own protection, and I do kind of understand some of that. And they carted me off to the local hospital. After observation there, they just basically put me in a room and just observed me. Checked in periodically to ask me how I was feeling. At that point, for those people who may have gone through a panic attack or some event, all I could really do was just curl up into the fetal position. So that I laid on the gurney there in the fetal position, and that's the only way I could kind of give myself some type of comfort. And they decided that, look, he needs further attention, more than what we can give him in an emergency setting. So let's send him off to the behavioral health center. And they proceeded to call the sheriff's department to come do that for them. They came to transport me, but this time, not only did they handcuff me, they shackled me as well. And they put me in the back of a police car and they delivered me to the behavioral health center, where the next morning I saw the judge and they determined that I needed to remain there for about 14 days for emergency evaluation and treatment. So I forget what they call it in that state. That did not happen in New Jersey. But each state has some type of a mandatory detention for psychological disorders, where they feel like they need to make sure you're okay and that the people around you are going to be okay. Well, I wasn't okay. And that was really the turning point. And the reason why I decided to focus on that event is that was the turning point back toward wellness for me. I hope I didn't lose everybody. So I'll continue, even though it seems like my colleagues are not here. That was a turning point back toward wellness for me because I was able to receive a more accurate diagnosis. I had been diagnosed before as having major depression disorder. I was very, very upset due to some events in my life, starting with the towers of 9/11, which basically I lost my life savings in. And then, of course, the death of my father, the loss of my marriage, it just snowballed to the point that I was just absolutely emotionally overwhelmed and exhausted. So it had come to a point where I ended up homeless. I ended up on the streets of Newport News, Virginia, and Hampton, Virginia. And it was very embarrassing because I had been a business owner in Hampton. and it was relatively well known. You know, insurance agents like to have their name all over the place so they can make a little business from here every now and then. And I was also very civically involved. So I had been appointed to positions by 3 different Hampton mayors. So when I fell hard and I fell loud because the newspaper got a hold of it.
Public fall.
So it was a very, very public fall, and the stigma was strong. The comments on, I made the mistake of reading some of the online comments to some of the, news reports, and they were disparaging, to say the least, some of them. However, there were also some that were very encouraging and supportive, because there were some other gentlemen who I'd done business with that came to my aid and began to support me financially to help get me off the street. So, the events are important. My very, very first event happened when I was 31 years old, and we went through Operation Desert Storm, and, I was in the military area. So I thought I was going to have to close my business. And that drove me to the point that I thought that my wife, I had no children at that time, but I was married. I actually thought that my wife might be better off with my life insurance proceeds than with me. And I was 31 years old, and proceeded to give myself a heart embolism. I knew enough about, physical, I knew enough about the human body to know that if you got air in your veins, you're probably going to have an embolism. And thank God I failed so that I can be with you today. And I followed that with 2 or 3 other occurrences, all related to not taking my medication. Every single time I ended up in crisis after that, it was because I took the medication to the point that I felt better, my mind was clearer, and I can grunt it out from here all on my own. That is a normal symptom of mental illness, especially those people who are diagnosed with bipolar, which I am now diagnosed. It is often misdiagnosed as depression or anxiety.
Yes.
They realize that you have both the lows and the highs. There are different types of bipolar, and mine happens to be bipolar 2, which they kind of call bipolar light, but it was light enough to put me out on disability, because it was the lows for bipolar 2 are I've been places I wish no one else has to go.
Wow.
The lows are extremely dark. There were times when I was in the bed for 22 or 23 hours out of 24-hour day. There were times that I could not get myself up just to go to the bathroom, that I'd rather use the bottle that I had just got done drinking out of. And I thought I was lazy. It's like, what in the world happened to me? I wasn't lazy. I was sick. There was a brain chemical dysfunction going on that just completely debilitated me. So that's the event. There's, the healing process is a long process. I don't think you are ever recovered. I think you're always recovering.
On the road to recovery.
And the reason I do what I do now as a peer counselor is because as I help others with their recovery, I remind myself of my own and the things that I need to do to remain well, because recovery looks like me. But the other side of that is mental illness also looks like me.
Yeah. Yeah. That the first thing I want to say is thank you.
Absolutely.
I want to say that we are here with you, brother, and that I felt everything that you just said. And I just, again, thank you for being courageous enough to take the covers off and share your events, your story, your journey, the things that you have gone through personally, and that you continue to encounter on such a public platform. And I believe that through your testimony right now, that there are going to be some amazing things that are going to come from this. I see that we have a viewer who stepped in, and she's actually asking one of the questions that we have up for today, which is, how do you help someone in crisis, and what are those first steps? So welcome, Janine. We appreciate you coming into the throne room and asking your questions. Invite your friends, and whoever wants to take a first go at the answering that question, y'all are free. unless Brother Jerome, unless you want to answer the question, and that delves out to Brother.
There's a couple different ways, and some of them unfortunately don't end well.
Right.
I think a lot of times we think what we do when someone is acting out, so to speak, is call 911.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily end well in our community.
Not in our community.
Not at all.
So sometimes what you need to do is make sure that the people around that person are safe. And sometimes you don't need to say anything. You just need to be there. You need to let that person know that, first of all, this isn't going to last forever. Because it feels like when you're in that moment, you feel like you're going to be in that moment until death. So the person needs to know that, this episode that they're having isn't going to last forever. Please don't try to diagnose me, because most people we're not qualified to do so. Keep me safe. Keep me as calm as you possibly can. I may actually be in a rage, and that's difficult. If you can escort me safely to a crisis center, then please do so. But I would say ultimately one of the last resorts, if you have a direct number, and there are a lot of direct crisis numbers when you can call crisis directly without involving law enforcement, because really they're not prepared to handle that type of call very well. We're just beginning to get our police departments certified in crisis intervention. And that's exactly what it is. It's a crisis intervention. There has been no crime committed. Mental illness is not a crime. So you want to get to the professionals that can begin to calm that person down, get them to understand that there is an end to the episode, and then try to encourage the person to seek further evaluation and diagnosis, and hopefully assistance through medication and or psychotherapy. I've been through all of those. In fact, it took me from beginning to end, when I got serious about my recovery, it took 50 months of everyday therapy. 50 months.
Wow.
And doesn't take everybody that long, but it took me 50 months before I felt like I could step out there on my own and become a certified peer specialist to help others come out of the fire.
Yeah, wow. That's good. Brother Ned, did you have something that you wanted to add to that?
Well, I mean, I'm first off, I'm like you. I want to just say thank you, Brother Jerome, for just being transparent today. Your courage inspires. But I wanted to chime in on something that you shared as well. And I think that one of the worst things that can happen is making the wrong call.
Yes.
In our communities in particular. And you're absolutely correct when you say that, for whatever the reason, our first call tends to always be to law enforcement, and it tends to just make the situation more volatile than helpful. And so people need to make themselves aware of those hotline numbers, those call numbers.
There are people on the other end that know how to de-escalate. I've been on the other end of those calls, and I understand where that person is. We call it talking them off the ledge, because that's essentially what you have to do.
What you're doing, yeah, and you have to know how to do that. Not everybody is equipped to do that, and it's sad to say, but the folks who are charged with the responsibility of serving our communities in law enforcement aren't trained in those areas, and so they, being the first line of defense and not knowing how to handle it is just an additional burden to the crisis. And so, I think that it's important for us to make ourselves known and to make ourselves aware, I should say, of who we can call depending upon what the situation is. Like, for example, I work in a municipality, and there's a line to call if you need issue with your trash. To call this department. If there's an issue with a tree, you call this. Like, there's a hotline number for everything, and we find it for those other areas. We should know the hotline numbers when we're dealing with a crisis in our community, because as we've noted over the past few weeks, our communities in particular deal with trauma on a daily.
Yeah.
So then you should be aware of, whether it's in your household or your neighbor next door or someone who just walking through your street. Just yesterday I was dealing with an issue. A young man who lives a few doors down from me. It was clear he was just not his normal self. And he was just out in front of his house, and he was loud, and he was by himself, and he had his headphones on, and it was clear he was just shouting out these lyrics to the music that he was listening to. But you can tell it was done with such a level of anger that there was something going on. And so I stopped and went over and talked to him, and he was like, I'm good. And I was like, fam, you don't look good.
Yeah.
But know that if you need me, you know where I live. Knock on my door, come talk to me or whatever. And I left it there. And he understood, and he saw me this morning, and he was like, I appreciate you stopping for me. But you got to be aware of that and how to manage that in our communities, because we see it every day.
And we can't respond with fear. We have to respond with the compassion that you just did.
Absolutely.
You know, it could be any of us. If you had told me I'd be on this program having this conversation with you, I would have told you that it was impossible. There's no way. I'm too intelligent to have a mental illness. You know, those types of things cause you to deny. And I'm walking around here with a degree in psychology and sociology. You know, so right away, I kept keeping myself out of the diagnosis. That doesn't apply to me because this criteria doesn't fit.
Doesn't fit.
But it did apply to me. You know, but it took me some 23 years from age 31 with my first event to age 53 when I decided that I needed to get serious about getting some help. In the meantime, your family's been destroyed. You've lost your business. You know, I mean, there's so many things that go wrong. There's so much collateral damage to not getting help as early as possible. Early intervention is so important. I may have been able to avoid some of these incidences had I gotten early intervention, but thank God that I'm here now at the end of it, being able to encourage others to do so.
Absolutely.
That's good. Jackie, did you want to respond to the question from your perspective?
Well, one of the good things about the state of New Jersey is the state of New Jersey has a mobile response stabilization service in every county. Knowing that number and how to contact them in the case of a crisis is very important, because first and foremost, when you know someone's in crisis, the first thing you want to make sure, like Jerome and Ned said, is the safety of that person, yourself, and those around you is first and foremost important. And knowing how to contact or who to contact is important as well. One of the things that we are embarking on here in Essex County, and this has been a statewide initiative, is making sure that the police are aware of how to interact when there is a mental health challenge or even an intellectual developmental challenge, and the call that they receive, and how sometimes what they do can trigger an episode. So being observant of, like Ned said, being observant, knowing and looking at the people that are in crisis, if you know them, knowing that it's not their norm and that they're out of character, and being able to, be there. The ministry of presence, sometimes just your presence, your warmth, a warm smile or a warm embrace can help de-escalate. They are in a place where you never know what might be that ticking time bomb that sets them off, and you don't want to be that person. So sometimes just being there, you don't have to say nothing. It's key in a crisis. And I want to say, Jerome, when I heard your story, knowing how you don't like doing videos, I applaud you for your transparency, because that's common in our community. The police and how they handle situations can be traumatic on top of what you're already dealing with in the situation that you're in. And we in this industry call it complex trauma. There's so much that could be going on, and they often come in gung-ho, guns blazing, and add to the trauma, because just one wrong grab, and now you got that on top of what you're already dealing with, on top of the shame and the guilt. And I say this all the time: if the shame don't kill you, the guilt will. And people are not open with their mental health challenges, and they handle it differently because of the shame and the guilt that's attached to it. And that's why we're here to have this conversation, to try to bring awareness and to say, hey, like we said last week, mental health is just as important as physical health. And just like you go and take medicine for diabetes, heart disease, and Jerome said it in his video, a lot of people neglect that and think, because I feel better, I'm good. You know, how many of us take all of the antibiotics when they give it to us? When we start feeling good, we stop, right? And you got a couple of antibiotics still in the cabinet. You know, when you start feeling good, no, that means your system is adapting to it. Keep it coming into your system. Don't stop.
And when you do that, let's talk about antibiotics. And that's an excellent example, because if you don't take the full schedule of antibiotics, not only can the infection return, but it returns more virulent than it was before, because now it's learned how to overcome the antibiotics because you didn't take enough of them.
Yes.
You know, so that each time I ended up in a crisis center or an emergency room, it was worse. It was worse. So now I think I mentioned before, I medicate myself twice a day, one for my highs and one for my lows. And the reason I do that on a regular basis at 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening is because I'm afraid not to. I feel great. I function well, you know, but I'm afraid not to. I've been there too many times. So if I have resigned myself to the fact that if I have to do this for the rest of my life in order to have a good quality life and remain in wellness, and then so be it. I'd have to do it if I was a diabetic, perhaps, unless I did the exercise and dieting, and I still may be on insulin, either pills or injections, for the rest of my life. I'd have to do it for heart condition. I'd have to do it for my arthritic pain. You know, so there's so many things. We have to normalize mental illness to the point that we understand that it really isn't any different. You just don't see it.
Right.
It's a hidden disability. And that's where a lot of the stigma comes from. Well, you don't look like you're, our favorite word.
Yes, correct.
You don't act like you're, well, most of the time we don't, unless it's a very severe, and we see it on the streets. There are some severe cases on our streets that have been ignored for so long that they're very, very pronounced now. Where they're talking to the telephone poles and the cars, and schizophrenia is rampant in our community, and it comes from complex trauma. Unresolved trauma causes your brain to protect itself. It creates other realities.
Right.
So for those people, they are in their reality. They are indeed talking to someone. You don't see them.
You just don't see them.
I don't see them. But they not only see them, but they also hear them. I also do hearing voices, focus groups for those voice hearers. Some people with bipolar hear voices. A lot of people with schizophrenia hear voices. And to understand what those voices mean and where they come from and what they sound like and what do you do when you hear them and what triggers those voices.
Jerome, look, you do it and tell us all about it.
Well, I get carried away. I love what I do now, but I'm going to give a plug to a couple organizations because I'll be presenting in October for an organization called the National Alliance of Mental Illness Mercer, NAMI Mercer.
Yes.
NAMI Mercer ushered me out and back into the community. They gave me a job at their front desk. And at that time, my ability, now here's a college educated person who ran a business. My ability when I first came out of recovery was to be able to put address labels on the back of a brochure. And I would forget the instructions on how to do that.
Wow.
From one office to another in the same office suite. I'd have to go back and say, what did you say again? Because my clarity was that foggy. I could hear your voice. I know you just told me to do something, but by the time I got back to my desk, I forgot what it was.
This is so real. So I want to say this, to me, probably is the best show yet. I'm going to say it from that perspective because I just love the fact that we are being really transparent about what this looks like in real time. And as you were talking, all I could think about was, that individualized, personalized stigma and our inability to see our own realities, right? I was having this conversation earlier with my mom, and then as you were talking and you just said the same thing, I think about myself in my divorce. And again, mental illness does not stay away from everybody. It hits everyone's home. It's basically
1 in 5.
Right?
1 in 5 people.
It's there. I think about myself from the perspective of I was going through my divorce. And when I was going through my divorce, there was a short time span where I didn't realize it, but like I really had a drinking problem. Like I was going through something. I couldn't understand. Like I was clubbing every day. Like it was like, get up, go. I'm going to get it. I was even intermingling with people who I considered were my friends, and they were safety nets. Turned out to be they were not friends. And so the things that they did, I can't be surprised about, because they were the type of people that they were that I was around. They too were hurting, right? So hurting people
self-medication.
Right.
A lot of self-medicating.
A lot of self-medication.
I could not see myself at that time. I was in pain. And what I hear is oftentimes we confuse our pain for other things, like, oh, people don't understand me. Oh, I
don't fit in.
Right. We are dealing with pain, the traumatic experiences that are built on top of each other. My divorce was my straw, right? I've been through a lot, but the divorce was the straw, right? And when I had that experience, it took a lot for me to see myself outside of myself. I thought that I was really helping myself get through. Oh, I'm doing this. I'm going out. I'm building up my new life. I'm getting my whole life together. He don't know what he missing out on, and he going to do this. And oh, well, but I was really hurting myself. And we don't see that when we're in it. So
divorce is a relationship in hospice. So just think about hospice.
Wow.
And that's what divorce is. It's a relationship in hospice. And once you get that divorce paper, I got mine February 14th, 2012. Okay. And it was like somebody died. You know, I mean, it's a memorable Valentine's Day present, but it's like someone passed away. My relationship was dead now. It was in black and white. It was finished. We hadn't been together for 11 years.
It's a loss.
You know, but it was a loss. Absolutely, it was a loss.
Yeah.
You know, and it was made permanent by that document. So it was painful. And see, we need to normalize those feelings the same way we normalize the self-medication. Oh, girl, you're going to be all right. Just get you a drink.
You're going to come out tonight. You're going to buy you some new D. Like, this is
going to make you feel okay. You're going to be okay. You need to just get out and enjoy yourself. That's what you need.
And for that moment when you have that drink, you do feel okay.
Yep, exactly. Just like we normalize those prescriptions for those people who are hurting, they're hurting. They need more than what you can get over the counter. You know, sometimes you need some time on the couch.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with the couch.
Feeling with you.
Right.
Yeah. So that's good. So what is the strength? I'll say it. What kind of strength does it take for a person to really deal with the fact that they are in this dark space, that they really need to seek help? What kind of strength? So do we need to push past that shame and that stigma and that need of the wanting to let go? So we say let go in one way, right? Oh, you need to let that go. But some people say, I'm going to let go, like forget all of that. Because at one point in time, I didn't care about anything. I had lost my kids. I had lost my marriage. I lost my house. I lost cars. I lost everything. My job, like everything was stripped from me. And I couldn't see, like you said, everything, your vision, it was foggy. Like I could not see anything. And it was so treacherous that it was like, how can I, what they say, put your big girl panties on and pull yourself up by your bootstraps? It didn't come like that. It didn't exist in that nature. So what's that strength that's needed for that?
I want to hear Jackie, because Jackie said this one already. I think on a previous episode, Jackie kind of admitted what it took to realize that, look, I need some help. Sorry, Jackie.
That's okay. You hit it. Because oftentimes, because of the way our cultures, we are resilient people, and we've endured so much. And I was reading something the other day that says, you know, because as a Black woman, and Black women in general are considered strong, the things they go through and endure are minimized because they're considered strong. But why do we have to be strong? It negates the strength that we really have, instead of saying, oh, they'll get over it. No. Why do we have to endure such things? So when you look at trauma, when you look at how much we endure and our resilience as a people, how we get through it and how we get over it is really key. Community and relationships are really key in that aspect. We all need to have that one trusting person that we can talk to, judgment free, that can connect with us. And, and sometimes people think, what do I have to say? Nothing. Just be there. You don't have to say nothing, because sometimes all I need to do is know that I'm heard. Because in our communities, we're not heard. Our voice is minimized, and that's one of the things that I love about in the work. We talk about family, voice, and choice, but how much is that really being actualized in schools? If the kid says he don't want to take the pill, okay, I have a nephew whom I raised for about 7 or 8 years. I saw how the pill did, and one day I took his pill for ADHD, and I went to work, and I sat at my computer. I got nothing done all day. And I came home and took them pills and flushed them in the toilet and was like, oh no, we got to find another way to do this. Took them off medication completely and found other how they call it, holistic ways of dealing with his ADHD. And you know what? A black cup of coffee in the morning worked for him. It kept him all day. But the pill, he would not eat all day and eat everything in the house all night. And I was like, we can't have this. I had to find a way to transition him, but also help him, because even with the kids that I work with, Miss Jackie, I can't take that pill because I'll be feeling like a zombie. And you know what they do? They smoke weed. And I tell them like this, okay, if you're going to smoke weed, make sure you interact and not act silly all day, because now you got something against you. So having people that you can go to, children need those caring and trusting adults that they can talk to, because most of the time, like me, I couldn't talk to my mother. My mother that was able to reach me, but I had a community of people that were, helping support me and say, hey, we can talk anytime. I got an open door policy. Anytime I'm here for you. And youth and young adults definitely need that caring adult that's not going to point the finger at them and tell your mother. 9 times out of 10, when you're dealing with mental illness, you don't care about all of that. You're just trying to find a way to get to the next day.
And part of the stigma is some of the mental illness, there's a genetic component. My mother had been on what we call nerve pills back in the day, not realizing that she was, I keep forgetting the name. It started with a V, Valium. She was on Valium. So she would tell you to go, and that's heavy duty stuff.
Right.
But she'd tell you, go get my nerve pills. And she would take her nerve pills. So part of it was a genetic component. My mother was terminally ill. She was going through depression. She may have also had bipolar. I'm not sure. I mean, she only lived to be 50 years old. So we didn't know. And of course they didn't know as much about it then. Bipolar wasn't even called bipolar. It was called manic depressive disorder back then. But we need to, you said enough. You said it all, and I don't think that I can really add very much to it. The strength is that the whole thing about being strong is a myth.
Absolutely.
The strength is in asking for help.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
The let it go, it will pass really means repression. It means press it down and forget about it. You can only put so much stuff into a 5-pound bag. Okay. You can't get 10 pounds into a 5-pound bag.
And that's why we have crisis, and that's why we explode.
Exactly.
That bag is going to burst eventually.
The bag went over its limits.
Yeah. For men of color and people of color, but men of color, our depression presents as agitation and anger. And I didn't know that. I thought it was Eeyore. Eeyore off of what is that? Winnie the Pooh. I thought that's what depression was. It was, well, it's not that way. We have learned that if we're afraid, if we're embarrassed, if it becomes aggression. You diss me, now I got to fight you or worse. But see, our symptoms of depression we don't understand. It's very confusing feeling. It's a very confusing place to be sad all the time about everything. And it can be the most sunshiny day there is, but there's rain in my heart. So that's a scary place to be. And you don't know how to express that. So certainly having someone to talk to that doesn't judge you is very helpful. But we don't do that in our community. We you know what so-and-so told me? You know, we always thought there was something wrong. Now we know.
Or they become the butt of the joke.
You know, they take
Right,
medicine. You know, they take some medicine. They
Become the
take
neighborhood
crazy
joke.
pills.
Yes.
You know, I had to
one
make
thing
my
I do.
normalizing it. I started calling my medication. At one point, I was on 8 meds a day. Now I'm on 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. Thank you, Lord. But I called them Skittles, and I had to normalize them. And I said, look, it's time for me to take my Skittles. You know, at some point, you got to learn how to laugh at yourself and just surrender to the thing and say, look, if I'm going, I can either fight this or I can go with it. Right. You know, and if I need to take my Skittles in order to feel better tomorrow, then let me take my Skittles. You know, so you know, because they're all different colors. There's some interesting stuff, and it's not like a lot of physical medication. Mental health meds work differently for everyone, and sometimes they don't work at all for people.
Right.
You know, some people are medication resistant or allergic to the medication, and they oftentimes have to do some trial and error. They know what works most of the time for most people, but now they're actually getting into some genetic tracing on medication so they can give you the medication that your genetic makeup is most likely to receive and get those chemicals going properly again.
Right.
You know, so we don't necessarily know about those things. The genetic matching for medication hopefully soon will be a primary treatment rather than all this trial and error. I had one medication that made me chase the cat and try to pull the tail off of it. Okay. And then I didn't know you were supposed to titrate off of it. So I just stopped taking it and I'm sitting in the corner rocking. Wow. Okay. So it's they're nothing to mess with. It's messing with your brain chemicals, you know, but hopefully it's getting you to the point that you produce the necessary serotonin and all the brain chemicals that help your brain synapses communicate. And I don't want to get too technical, but our brain nerves don't connect. There's a space in between, and there are chemicals that cause those messages to get across. When the chemical makeup is not proper, the messages don't get across.
Right. I want to step in right there on that, Jerome, because when I treat, I do a session on trauma with families, and I talk about the severing of those neurons because of trauma. When you endure trauma, especially over a long period of time, you sever those connections.
Correct.
And studies have shown that we call it our downstairs brain. All of our reactions and responses are in our amygdala, right? So we want to get to our upstairs, our frontal lobe, our upstairs brain. And over prolonged periods of trauma, we look at, especially in our community, because, you know, sometimes just waking up in the morning is traumatic, depending on what your environment is, because, you know, we're people live in an environment. We adapt to our environment. And if your environment is hostile, if your environment is not stable, over long periods of time being exposed to this can sever some of those neurons. This is some of the trauma we endure, right? So when we look at the connections, studies have proven that the more positive reactions and interactions that you have, you begin to replace those connections. And then replacing
neuroplasticity. That's the word.
Yeah, and that's where we have to help our community get to. How do you create more positive interactions, positive relationships to help undo the damage of what we call adverse childhood experiences? When we look at ACEs, we look at how many of those 12 now. New Jersey had added one more. COVID was added to it as another, you know, one of the categories. How many of us have 6 or more of those categories that we've lived in? Abuse, neglect. Physical and verbal abuse is covered under abuse, but violence in the home, substance use in the home. And we look at all of these things that we have grown up, that was normal in our eyesight, but we didn't know, you know, the drunk mother or father or aunt or uncle falling up and down the stairs coming home. Kids being exposed to that can be traumatic.
It is traumatic.
It is, yes, because, you know, we laugh at it when they fall, but then, you know, some people have had incidences where people have fallen and died. And that here comes the complex on top of the environment, on top of the abuse, on top of the drugs and alcohol.
I should have done something.
Yes.
I wish I had been there.
Yep.
You try to take them from irrational thinking to problem solving. And how do you do that when somebody's, I wouldn't say denial, but they're kind of apprehensive about, you know, oh yeah, that's books, that's studies. But we have seen And we've been pushing this, trying to help our parents, because a lot of our parents endured it as children. They have lived traumatic lives as children, and they parent from that place. So helping parents to say, hey, this is what I've gone through. I need help. They'll come to a support group, but they ain't going to sit on nobody's couch. But you know what? We try to connect them with the right resources, because when parents do better, children do better. And that's how we start healing our communities. We have to start with the core of the home, the core, which are the adults. Because some of our adults don't realize that what they do and how they parent and how they live their day-to-day lives is because of the trauma that they've endured.
Simply the way they talk to their children.
Yes. To be in a supermarket and hear grown adult cursing a 3-year-old out like he's 25, that's traumatic. That's not normal. You don't talk to a 3-year-old like that. But that parent thought it was okay.
Surprised that they grow up to be what you just called them.
Whatever, and this is where words have power. Words can shape.
That power of the tongue. You're speaking things into the lives of these young people, and then when they manifest and they have maladaptive behaviors as adults, you wonder where it came from.
Where did it come from?
And the venom in which we say those words, and then you go back and say, "I love you." They ain't trying to hear that.
Right.
And I tell parents, if you hurt
with a warped understanding of love,
and what love is,
start perpetrating that same love on others. Do you know most child abusers were abused as children?
Yes,
because
the abused became the abuser.
Exactly.
And that's where you have to look at
a lot of pain. So we are hurting ourselves intergenerationally because we are hurting ourselves, and we won't address our own pain.
Yes, and I say it all the time.
You know, I know I'm gonna get comments about, man, you should have never said that. You sound weak. No, I'm strong. Believe me, I know how strong I am.
Yes, but you know what, man? If you don't say it, who's gonna say it?
I used to think it was a curse. It is now a blessing to be able to have this program and to be able to contribute to it. It's a blessing to know. I look back over where I've been, and you can't tell me there's not a God, because there's no way in the world I could get up off my face by myself. It was just no way. You know,
just hit on something really important to me, and I'm gonna tie all of that into what you just said. So, Jackie, you touched on a topic which is called neuroplasticity, and I deal with that in my doctoral research. I really am working on how do we create as ministries, as organizations, programming and things that are going to maintain and sustain transformation over the long haul. And one of the ways in which we do that is by dealing with the entire family unit. When we talk about what does restoration, rehabilitation versus how do we get people to recovery? What is it that we're trying to get them to see? What we really are looking for is helping people to understand and see something inside of themselves. And that's a really hard thing to do, right? We got to be able to figure out ways for people to see inward. And what you just said, Jerome, is that part about why faith is so important in this journey, and why houses of faith need to understand their importance, their role, right? All of the things that they do inside of the house, right? Why it's important for the community.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
If I can go to my fellowship hall at my church and get a blood pressure screening, or a diabetes, get my blood sugar tested to see if I might be pre-diabetic, why can I not go and take a preliminary psychological evaluation?
I'm gonna tell you why, Jerome. I'm gonna tell you why, right?
The casting of the demons.
There it is.
Yes. The church and I'm gonna say the faith-based community, because it's bigger than the church.
Right.
The faith-based community don't want to touch that.
They don't
want to. One, and this is what I was told when I went to bring this information into there. Oh, that's an insurance risk. We have to check with our insurance carrier.
Right.
But 9 times out of 10, what they will find out in the masjid, in the temple, in the church, in the synagogue is, once they start delving into this, they'll better understand the people that are sitting in their congregation.
Absolutely.
They'll better understand how to reach the community.
Part of healing. If you don't know what hurts, how do you heal it?
You can't.
It says somewhere in the Bible, he that is whole needeth not a physician. But people come to those places because they need help. And they're looking for help.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you to all of you. This conversation is one that needs to continue, even from this perspective, because there's so much more that I want to say, even from the perspective of how we deal with it as an institution when we police people, and it's taken from, it's almost like they're taking that fall from grace, right? And we add another layer of trauma to that, and then from there having to deal with the manifestations of the things that are going on versus what's actually happening inside of them, and how we deal with our education systems and the classifications that we give our children when we really don't understand that, oh, they're acting out in anger because maybe they couldn't sleep that night because they were thinking about a traumatic event that had happened to them. So their response was really a response out of the fact that they didn't get sleep due to trauma, right?
And that's common in the education system. And our community, there's a lot of charter schools coming up.
We've admitted
the teachers that are in the charter schools are not of this culture. So when kids come to school uneasy, unrest, or get on camera that way, the first thing they say is discipline problem, but they never think what may have happened, not just in that home, but in that community.
Right.
That community could have triggered them. And on their way to school, to walk by blood on the ground and to hear the conversation. That's why I tell parents, have the conversation with your children, because if you don't, their peers are having that conversation, and they
But here's the caveat though, Jackie. Most parents are not equipped to be able to have the conversation because no one had the conversation with them. And so this is why it's important for us to be able to have these conversations, and then have conversations with leaders who are willing to listen, and then be able to act upon the things that they have listened to. So I'll say listen, learn, and then give, right?
So the faith-based community needs to create that safe place, that safe space to have those conversations.
Yeah.
And that means sometimes educating the leadership. You know, that's
my mission. That's my mission.
That's why we here.
That is fantastic mission, because that's what needs to happen, is that we educate the leadership to the point that at least don't give out misinformation. At least don't tell everybody that's having a psychological crisis that they've been demon possessed.
Right.
You know, I mean, at least that much. Let's stop spreading the misinformation, and then let's create that safe place where someone can come to you and you have a listing. Maybe you can't handle it yourself, but there's a listing of referral sources that you can usher, not push, not throw, but usher that person toward.
Right.
You know, to say you might be able to get some assistance here. They might be able to help you understand what's going on better. Can I make that phone call with you?
Yes.
Right. Can I make that call with you?
That was the wall.
Because next time maybe you can make it on your own. But right now, I'm gonna say, let's do that right now. There's no time like the present. Let's do that right now. Are you ready? Good. Okay, I'm dialing the number. Let's just put it on speakerphone. Do you mind? You know, and get that person connected. Because if the person on the other end is properly trained, they're going to strip that person's fear and make them feel safe very quickly. That's the first thing you have to do.
Yeah.
First thing you have to do is say, you know, I understand.
Create a place of comfort.
I felt that way myself, you know, and then I found that, you know, I mean, and you need to walk the journey with that person. And that's really our Christian walk, isn't it? Our faith-based walk.
I was just going to say
that we're supposed to walk with people. We don't just point them toward the cross. Sometimes you got to walk them to the cross. You got to
walk them through. That's right.
I love all of this, and I'm going to give, in our last 5 minutes, I'll give each of you a minute to be able to leave our listeners with something. If there was one thing that you wanted our listeners to gain from today, what would that thing be? Brother Ned, I'm gonna lead with you.
You're gonna lead with me.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Well, first off, before I even go into that, I just want to thank this panel. You guys have no idea how helpful the information that you're sharing is for me, as well as for the folks I believe that are watching and listening in. There's no way that this is not impacting lives.
Right.
So thank you for the courage to stand up and speak out. So for our listeners, though, I guess one of the things that I would love to be able to leave on the table for them to, again, it goes right back to what I said earlier today about just making sure that we are looking for in advance those resources that we know we need. And to think that you don't need them is you fooling yourself. They are in our community. We are dealing with them on a daily basis already. Find the resources, connect to those resources so that you can provide the help and give the support that people need, whether it's in your house or in your neighborhood or in your community at large. We say it all the time with everything that we do. You're not in it by yourself. You're never alone, but you got to reach out and let folks know you need the help.
Yeah.
I like that, Ned. I like that. One thing comes to mind when I just thought about what you just said. He was moved by compassion.
Mm.
It's our compassion that will lead us to letting people know that they're not alone and being with them, walking with them on the journey with them. And when people know they're not alone and that somebody really cares, it makes recovery easier. And it takes this sting out of recovery because they know they got somebody there. Just if you just listen, just be there, just to know that you know what they rooting for you. Sometimes, and there's this song, I'm rooting for everybody that's black. I'm rooting for everybody that's hurt. I'm rooting for everybody that's downtrodden. I'm rooting for everybody that's cast away. And knowing that somebody's there lets you have that inner ability to say, you know what, I can get up from here. I can move on from here. I can grow from here. I can go forward from here. And you'd be surprised how much of a difference it'll make in somebody's life just to show them compassion.
Absolutely.
Brother Jerome?
I want to echo what Jackie said. You are not alone, and I'd like to drop some information. So if you can play this back later or write it down now, it's www.nami.org. There are even African American chapters within NAMI.
Absolutely.
It stands for the National Alliance. I'm sorry?
Isn't NAMI the African American chapter called NAMI X now or something like that?
I believe it is. I'd say it, but I don't know it, and I don't want to misinform you. But if you go to that website,
say it again.
That is the national website. It will filter you down to your state and your city, and up here where we are, it's NAMI Mercer, but there's NAMI in almost every county, and there's definitely NAMI in every state.
Correct.
So the national office is down in Arlington, Virginia, but it allows you to be with people who have experienced this already, who are either in recovery. They work with people in this population every single day. They know the things not to say to someone, because a lot of times we just, it exacerbates the stigma because somebody will just say something offensive. They don't mean to. One of the most offensive things is, did you take your meds? Every time somebody, did you take your meds? That can be offensive, Now it's a little bit easier to say, what time do you normally take your meds? That's so much softer,
Right.
It shows that you care about me and that you're trying to help me. You're trying to help me rather than scolding me. Did you take them? There's a difference. Sometimes it's just the way you make the phrase. How it flows out of your mouth makes a big difference. And people at NAMI know how to do that. And I like to thank them for all that they did for me, because my first day there was August the 3rd of 2016. Wow. And it really helped change my life.
Oh, wow. Well, that's
kudos to NAMI Mercer.
Kudos. I'm sure we'll have that in the the links in the comments, the website, in case anyone doesn't have that information.
Next episode, I'll invite everybody to the Harvest of Hope Festival in October.
Nice.
I love it. I just want to thank everybody, and I want to say this right here. One of the things that I want our listeners to walk away with is, number one, thank you for joining us. Number two is really
that was strong and brave.
Yeah,
tuning in is strong and brave.
Yeah, strong and brave. You're right. And then the second thing that I really want us to really think about and walk away with is the time and rest. It is so important for us to really take the time and understand that this is going to take time, that these are conversations that are being had over a short period of time, but just in a short period of time, they're making impact. So imagine if all of our little small communities come together and have their own little conversations, how much change can actually happen, how much transformation can be presently seen, right? And then that finding rest, because I think a lot of us really try to hide from how we deal with what is going on inside of us, really understanding that this reaches everyone at any place, at any point in time. It's like death, right? We don't know when it'll fall upon us, and we don't know how, when, or where, but we know that it is a possibility that it will, right? Whether it's heavy or whether it's light. And so I am saying to us that we just need to take some time to remember to find rest, find that place where we can just get to ourselves and hear ourselves so that we can heal, because
Amen.
the trauma that we're experiencing might be distorting our realities. And so, again, thank you guys for joining us. Join us back here in the throne room for Healing Challenges Mental Health Edition, specifically for the minority community. We love everybody, but right now we're going to love on us. And so join us next Wednesday at 5 p.m. as we delve into trauma and sex trafficking and how that really impacts our communities. Thank you guys for joining us. Talk to you soon.
All right, guys.
See you next week.
See you next week.
See you next week.